back to what Putin's saying. He says that the people in the Donbass obviously need to be helped, and they start sort of defending this Donbass region. He mentioned, I'm not too sure where the numbers came from, but he says some of the countries were given more aid in money terms. This is prior to the war starting in 22. I've put on the little clip there, special military operations, because that is what Putin continues to call it. But I think, to be fair, to all intents and purposes, it's a war. He says that some of these Western countries were giving more money aid to Ukraine, this is before the war started, than there were to poor countries in the world. I think he was basically trying to bring in like the hippopotamus, that the Western countries say these things, but in essence they have a dislike, a hatred of Russia, and they're just wanting to see Russia fail. He mentioned about the money for wars. He says that there's monies for wars all of the time. He says there's no end to the money that the Western countries seem to be prepared to spend off on the wars. He didn't mention the countries, but fill in the blanks yourself. He says there's lots of failings in Western countries, and that basically some of the Western countries try and paint anybody who opposes them with like a black hat. Paint them as the baddie, and that you can then skate over or not take into fully account the failings in the Western, in their own countries. And he basically accused the EU, Germany, Austria, UK. UK was still in the EU at the time. In 2014, he called it a putsch. I think this is like a revolution, overthrow, whatever. He says, in the West, he says that the West is Russia-phobic. He says the West has a hatred for Russia, because Russia wants to do things kind of different to what the Western countries do. He says it's an endless symbolic sort of ongoing hatred for Russia. He mentioned some things that apparently the Ukrainian troops were calling themselves Edelweiss. I think that's a throwback to World War II, when Germany invaded USSR, which Ukraine was part of. It's one of these things which I can understand it from both sides. I can understand it from the Russians not feeling very happy with that. And I can understand it from the Ukrainian side using those terms. War with somebody, the gloves are off. That's the impression of that. He basically kind of said that the West had systematically plundered Ukraine with the intention to plunder Ukraine. He says he's not at war with the Ukrainian people. Which is the common phrase when people do that, you know, we're not at war with the people, we're at war with your government. He said that the Western military elites are using Ukraine to butt heads with Russia. They're just using the Ukrainians as a proxy so that they can butt heads, so that they can try and degrade Russia. He mentioned long-range weapons. A speech earlier at the Munich conference a few days ago, Rishi Sunak, the existing Prime Minister of the UK, said that he was up for supplying longer-range weapons to Ukraine. The response from Putin was that if the Ukrainians get longer-range weapons, then Russia's going to need to push further to ensure that these longer-range weapons can't do any damage to Russia or Russian-held territory. Wasn't too sure, but you might as well just call it Russia. This is by ever expanding and giving the Ukrainians more and more weapons, it threatens the existence of Russia. And he basically he hammered into it, saying that the military people, the Western military people, he says you'll find it difficult, if not impossible, to beat Russia militarily. He says, yeah, you're trying to pervert history and change what's happened in the past to reflect what you want to happen in the future. The translation, sometimes you've got to put a little bit in yourself, but throughout the speech, he was calm. He didn't particularly raise his voice. The speech wasn't inspiring from my point of view. It didn't flow particularly well. It was like a telephone book being read type of thing. There was no points. There was so many points that you lost the point. But he went on, he says the social values of the West are basically degrading, and he didn't want Russia to go that way, and didn't think Russians wanted to, and that the moral values of the West we don't want in Russia. He then moved on to Russia. Most of this was angled towards Russia. It didn't seem like he was giving a speech for other people to pick up on. He says, destiny is in our hands, i.e. we control our own future. He then went on a telephone book list of thanking all of the people, the soldiers, the sailors, the bakers, the candlestick bakers, blah, 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 blah. Thanks, sort of the families of the soldiers. He thanked the people in the Donbass region for the results of the referendums. You can argue whether it was legal, illegal, fair, unfair. You could possibly rerun them at some point with UN inspectors there, see if you get a different one. I would think that would never happen. He says we've started this conflict. We've started this support of the Donbass areas, and we'll will go on. He says, well, we'll generate jobs in those areas and we'll bring them up. We'll put industry in and we'll put roads in, linking them better to Russia, such as what we've done. I'm speaking as Putin here, such as what we've done in Crimea, by building the bridge, building up the infrastructure, pulling it more in so that there's good links and good jobs. He says the Donbass and Russia are both better and stronger by being together. He says we want peace. He says we want a peaceful outcome to this. And we want prosperity for the future generations that live in the Donbass and in Russia. Difficult to argue that. I would think just about any leader would say the same thing. He praised the soldiers that were fighting in the Donbass area. And then he asked the auditorium, everybody, to stand and give a moment or two silence. I didn't time it. Maybe it was on 20 or 30 seconds, something like that. All of the people stood up and there was complete silence. He says they're going to supply money. They're going to start a fund for the families of the dead servicemen that's been killed in the special military operation, the war. Also, because this I'll use the term war, it's easier to say than SMO. This is because this is going on so long that we need to start rotating the troops. We need to start giving the troops a couple of weeks at home, rest and recreation, furlough. Says a couple of weeks every 6 months. So I would imagine if you're some of the troops, that would come as good news. Mention the sanctions.